Thank you, Mr Speaker.
I call the honourable member David Bennett.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and just want to congratulate you as well on your appointment to your role, and to just follow on the regard to the Taxation, International Investment and Remedial Matters Bill. I think there were some interesting points that were raised by the last speaker, and one of the things in taxation law is that sometimes it can get too complex. And the more complexity you bring into taxation law, the more opportunity there is for people to try and avoid the law by getting around those rules. And the essence of what we're doing here today is to take out some complexity, to make it fair for New Zealand companies that are investing overseas in a manner in which they don't have control of those companies, but also have a significant investment in them, so that they are not under some set of rules and regulations that are frankly outdated and can lead to people trying to use those rules or having to structure their affairs in certain ways to avoid taxation, which would be much better if we did in a simpler and more effective form. So that's the purpose, I guess, of why this reform is before the Parliament, and something which in essence doesn't lead to the problems that the previous speaker spoke of that are encouraged by having too many rules and regulations. Many people have spoken about the nature and aspects of this bill, the active-passive taxation. For those that aren't tax gurus, active is when you have a business that is actively producing something. So if Fisher and Paykel, for example, was building washing machines in China, that would be active. Whereas passive is something where you just receive an interest or a royalty or a dividend, and so it's not an... And so that's the difference between active and passive. So when you hear members of Parliament talking about that in regard to this, it is very much to extend the active income exemption. So to extend the exemption for those companies that are actively engaging in activities, basically controlled foreign companies, CFCs, so that it applies to joint ventures and other significant shareholdings. So just say that you may have less than 50%, but a significant shareholding, and in an active company you would be taxed in this manner. And that is to give some fairness to New Zealand companies that are investing overseas, and to give them some simplicity in how we do business for them. Now, one of the things that was changed in Select Committee was in regard to the use of accounting principles. Now, generally accepted accounting principles, GAAP, is the American approach, and this legislation enables companies to fulfil GAAP in US accordance with US rules. So that means that they don't have to prepare two sets of accounts, because the US typically doesn't recognise the international accounting standards that a lot of New Zealand companies will be following. And so if we didn't have that, they would have to supply GAAP accounts for their activities in the US, and also international accounting standards, supplied regulations and financial reporting for those operations. So this is another attempt within the committee to reduce the compliance costs on companies, so that they don't have to have two forms of accounting records produced when it comes to the US and companies in that jurisdiction. So in essence, this bill is there to make it easier for New Zealand businesses to make money overseas. That's good for New Zealand. If our businesses make more money overseas and can bring that back to New Zealanders, that's in the best interests of New Zealand Incorporated, and something all members of this House I know will want to see happen, because that grows the pie here and is what we're all about, so that we can actually deliver those better services for our people. So this legislation is important. It's part of providing growth for our country, and delivers a taxation system that is much more up to date, recognises the current circumstances, and enables New Zealand companies to have a structure and system that is comparable with other countries, so that they can compete on a level playing field and don't have excess regulation from the New Zealand side. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I recognise the Honourable Clayton